Great, thanks. I would add to that we're looking at seed treatments across the board, and not only in this report from the CropLife Foundation, but also in the Guide to Seed Treatment Stewardship. And there are a number of different products that are used depending on the crop, depending on the location that they're planted across the nation, and realizing the benefit of this application technology moving forward. So this process started almost 3 years ago now, Jay, I'd say, with the guide, and then this about 2 years ago with the foundation study, realizing that we need to make sure that people understand how this technology is developed and how farmers have worked to adopt that technology. So I think Jay hit it on the head. It's depending on the week or the month. There's a new report coming out of Europe, so if we waited on that, then we wouldn't be able to make this presentation at any time.
I think Tim spoke eloquently about the benefit of seed treatment making farming easier and management able to be more comprehensive, but it also is easy for systems that reduce the demand of attention to also be taken for granted, and that's why we think it was timely for us, in conjunction with the National Corn Growers Association, the American Soybean Association, and Farm Bureau, to launch this seed treatment stewardship initiative a year ago, and we think we're making a significant difference in just reacquainting farmers and those in the seed industry with the importance of stewardship practices around these technologies, because they are important and need to be handled carefully.
Great, thanks.
Yes, question here.
Chris Wozniak, about Pesticides and Pollution Prevention Division at EPA. You had mentioned earlier that microbial products were being incorporated into the seed treatments, the pelleting and coating, and I'm just wondering if you can expand on whether these are more protectant type products or whether some of them are growth promoting products or both.
Yeah, so Andy, could you go ahead?
Yeah, I could touch on that briefly, Chris.
You can move the microphone over. Yeah.
It really is a combination of both as we go into it. The microbial or the biologicals are becoming more and more researched, I guess, and tested with the seed. As you look at the effectiveness in the soil, they're starting out with the protectants, and then they're also looking to see if there is a growth inhibitor or growth enhancer benefit to it. So we'll see, I think over the next 5 to 10 years, more and more of the biologicals that are used as a broadcast application experimented with the seed by the seed companies and seeing where those benefits are. Really what they're finding is that as you put it on the seed and in the soil, you have less of that environmental impact that you have when it's put on the plants out in the environment. And it seems to have more of a targeted effect at this point in time. So that's what we've got. That's what we're looking at going forward with biologicals.
Tim, do you have anything to add in terms of biologicals?
No. I had made my comments on those.
Anyone else?
I have an audio question from Gary.
Hello, this is Gary DeGiuseppe, Arkansas Radio Network. I have two questions. I'll ask them both at once. One is whether there are any concerns that the widespread adaptation of neonicotinoid insecticides seed treatments will lead to resistance problems developing. And secondly is whether you've examined EPA's new labeling guidelines and have determined whether they are going to have an adverse effect on crop producers and insect control.
Thank you, Gary. So with regard to your first question about the widespread adoption of neonic insecticides as seed treatments, are there resistance concerns? Certainly with regard to any product that gets widespread adoption, we need to pay attention to resistance development. And I think what we have seen certainly in the earlier stages of innovation with regard to insect-resistant biotechnology seeds, that there are resistance incidents popping up with regard to those technologies. but it's generally not widespread. There are localized conditions and situations, particularly around soil-borne insects that need attention, and evolution of resistance need scientific research, and that's something that is of concern to U.S. EPA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the many state agriculture departments and extension services around the country that work in collaboration with our industry and the seeds industry and farmers to know as much as we can about resistance, and having the appropriate alternative tools to rotate modes of action, whether it has to do with insect-resistant biotechnology traits or insecticides that are either synthetic or biologicals. So it's not always just seed treatment that might be part of the mode of action constituent in the overall portfolio of products being used, but also the return to some limited broadcast and other precision applied technologies to manage resistance. So great question, but I don't think it's a problem that exists today, but one that we always need to be working to guard against, and continuing to invest public and private research resources to ensure that we stay ahead of that curve. With regard to the new EPA label changes for the neonics, we believe that those are appropriate and implementable by the industry and understandable for farmers, and it will be another component of the overall stewardship education process that we'll be doing outreach around in this winter season ahead of the growing season 2014. Once again, Andy, could I see, do you have anything to add to either of those two questions? Okay.
I'd like to add something. On the issue of resistance, on the farm, we are, because we love these technologies and recognize the benefits, and not only is it my benefit, when I benefit, everyone benefits, and I didn't make that point earlier, but we constantly now are paying attention to best management practices. So, or whether it's insect resistance, and Jay was right about, insect resistance, but whatever it is, the educational efforts to us as producers, growers, is ramping up. And we do care. And because we want to keep technologies, we are doing the things necessary to rotations, whether it's herbicides for weeds, crop rotations, best management practices, we call it, to work against that type of resistance buildup. It's an issue that we are paying attention to.
Any other questions in the room or from the telephone? Yes.
Sarah
Please.
with the Conservation Districts again. I was just curious about some of the language that was in the introduction of the report, where it said that the products pose no unreasonable adverse effects on humans and the environment. And I was just wondering if you could speak as to what unreasonable the definition is.
Sure. This comes straight out of the safety standard that is in the regulatory statute called the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act that Congress has passed and reauthorized. And so that is the safety standard that EPA has to apply to making their regulatory decisions to register and re-register pesticide products. So an unreasonable adverse effect will vary depending on the scientific facts associated with any given active ingredient and how it is formulated and actually used potentially by farmers or other pesticide users, and the potential exposures that may occur to unintended targets in the environment. And so if it's a recoverable kind of an effect that doesn't have permanent impact on a non-target species, that would sort of get into that definition of a reasonable adverse effect, if you will, as opposed to an unreasonable adverse effect that might, be an acute, end of life for that particular non-target species. But again, it's the broad safety standard that is in the law that EPA has had decades and decades of experience in implementing on, again, a science-based approach, using every specific condition to take into consideration for a regulatory outcome. Yes.
Yeah, Chris Mosby, again, EPA. I'd just also add to that, that what is reasonable or unreasonable is at the discretion of the administrator of the agency based on what the statute says about it. And in addition, FIFRA is a little unusual in that it's a risk-benefit statute. So benefits, both economic and environmental benefits, can be considered in a risk management decision,
Right.
whether it's a registration or whatever.
Thank you. Was there another question on the telephone?
There are no questions at this time.
Very well. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for your time this morning. I know it's a busy holiday period and lots of other things going on from a policy standpoint here in Washington, D.C. and around the world, so we appreciate your time and attention. If you have additional questions, don't hesitate to contact us at CropLife Foundation and CropLife America. Likewise, if you'd like to reach the other two panelists, we can help enable you to have a continued conversation with them as well. Tim and Andy, thank you for joining us as panelists, and thank you again, and we're adjourned.